Welcome to a very special episode of the Faith Secure podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Over the past several months, I've had the privilege of sitting down with some extraordinary leaders, experts in emergency management, behavioral threat management, cybersecurity, Christian school preparedness, church security, trauma recovery, and of course, leadership. Every conversation has been unique, yet something remarkable happened. Although each guest brought a different area of expertise and a different perspective, they all kept coming back to the same foundational principles. And today I want to share the 5 leadership lessons that I've learned from these conversations and why I believe they matter for every church, regardless of size, denomination, or location. Quick disclaimer though, this isn't about creating fear. This is about helping churches become watchful, prayerful, and prepared. Let's start with lesson 1. The first lesson that I gathered from these conversations was preparedness is stewardship. One of the greatest misconceptions about church security is that it's about preparing for the worst. I don't see it that way. I see preparedness is stewardship. Every Sunday, pastors and church leaders are entrusted with something incredibly valuable: people. That's families, that's children, that's volunteers, that's guests that come to visit the church. Stewardship means caring for what God has entrusted to you. Preparedness is one expression of that stewardship. When we begin thinking about preparedness through the lens of stewardship, our next lesson, or lesson 2, naturally follows. And lesson 2 is security is a leadership responsibility. One theme surfaced repeatedly throughout nearly every conversation, and that was preparedness starts with leadership. The culture begins at the top, and it flows down all the way to the congregation. If leadership values preparedness, the church will value preparedness. If leadership delays or de-emphasizes preparedness, the church usually delays or de-emphasizes preparedness. It's leadership that sets the tone. Security isn't something that pastors delegate because they don't care. It's something they champion because they do. Lesson 3, prevention is always better than response. Whether discussing cybersecurity, behavioral threat management, emergency management, or physical security, every expert emphasizes prevention. You want to recognize concerns early, building relationships, planning before emergencies occur, and training before it's needed. Preparedness is proactive, not reactive. And lesson 4, churches don't have to choose between being welcoming and being prepared. This is maybe one of the biggest myths in ministry. Some churches believe that you have to choose. Either you're going to be hospitable and welcoming to the community, or you're going to choose to be secure. I vehemently disagree with that. Security must be built with hospitality as the foundation, because being welcoming to the communities are the bedrock of churches. And the best prepared churches are often the most welcoming. Why, you may ask? Because preparedness creates confidence. When you know what to do and when to do it, that allows ministry to flourish. Preparedness supports the mission. It never replaces it. Lesson 5, every church can start today. One of the questions I hear most often from pastors and church leaders is, where do we begin? And my answer is always the same: start somewhere. You don't need $1 million budget, or you don't need a full-time security director. Maybe Your first step is developing a simple emergency plan. Maybe it's training your ushers or greeters. It may be bringing a security professional in to conduct a security assessment. You also have to keep in mind, you don't need to do everything tomorrow. You just need to start somewhere. Progress is far more important than perfection. You have to be intentional about it. You have to take that first step. That's the key. Now, speaking of taking steps, I'm going to pivot and share some personal story about how I got to the point that I am with Faith Secure. I was a detective with the Buffalo Police Department in Buffalo, New York. I retired after 20 years. Then I got into contract security. I was a contract security manager. Then I left contract security management and got into corporate security management, where I was a corporate security director for a global automotive company. All the while, from the time I was contract security management, I was doing security consulting on the side. Then a funny thing happened. I was with my wife we're out of town for a training that she had to attend, and I'm in the hotel room. And I had an epiphanal moment of, why am I continuing to do security consulting on the side? Why not just do it full time? So as I'm thinking about that, I'm like, okay, when my wife comes upstairs, I'm going to discuss it with her. So my wife comes upstairs and she says, babe, guess what? I had a thought. I'm like, okay, I had a thought too. I want to share with you. She said, why don't you do security consulting full time? I said, babe, I was thinking the exact same thing. And then my wife took it another step. She said, not only do the security consulting full time, she said, do it with churches as the focus. Now, I had done some work with churches, and I saw the need of churches being notoriously soft targets, and that there was a lot of work to be done as far as securing churches. So I used to discuss that with my wife, and she said, you need to make that your full-time focus, and it needs to be a ministry. And it was at that point that we both realized that security isn't the goal, ministry is. And that's how Faith Secure was born. Now, during my career as a police detective, I investigated incidents after they occurred. I responded to crime scenes, and then I would start the investigation. Today, through Faith Secure, my mission is totally different. My goal is to help churches prepare before the crisis ever happens. I've worked with churches across the country, and I'm just going to put it bluntly. The average church is woefully unprepared. It's my mission to change that. This is my ministry, and I'm going to do it one church at a time. If one church strengthens its preparedness, if one pastor begins planning, if one child is protected, then this work that I'm doing matters. Here's my call to action for pastors and church leaders. If you're a pastor, church leader, or ministry leader, I encourage you to ask one simple question this week. What is one step we can do to become more prepared? One step. Then take that step. Preparedness is not a destination, it's a journey. So again, what is one step we can take to become more prepared? Ask yourself that question. I want to thank you for joining me on this special leadership conversation. And I hope that you'll continue following the Faith Secure podcast as we continue to bring together nationally known experts from across the country to help churches strengthen their preparedness while preserving the mission. Until next time, I want you to stay watchful, prayerful, and prepared. God bless you.